Welcome back to the Damage Report. I am Rayyvana filling in for John Idarola today, and joining me is host of Good Morning Bad News, Dan Evans. Dan, thanks so much for being here with me this morning.
It's a pleasure to be with you to go through this bevy of news stories, some, lighter than others, but I've been wanting to host something with you for a while, whether it's like a stream somewhere or something like this. So I'm very excited to do this.
Yeah, I'm glad that we finally get to do this together. And like you said, some good news, some less than good news. And today we're going to start off with something that is definitely less than good news.
Southern California, that horrific mass shooting on Saturday night. The victims were celebrating the Lunar New Year at a dance studio in Monterey Park when the gunman came in. At least 10 people killed, more in the hospital as we speak. And police say the suspect took his own life after officers approached him in a white van yesterday.
Gunshots rang out around 10:20 p.m. Saturday night.
And I got approximately 10 deceased.
Police say the gunman entered the venue and opened fire, killing 10 people and injuring 10 others.
Suddenly heard the boom, 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 boom.
Hattie Pung was there as the shooting broke out. She says several people around her were killed.
You will see the body already, several lying there.
At least 10 people were killed in a mass shooting Saturday at a dance studio in Monterey Park, California, as the city's Asian American community was celebrating Lunar New Year weekend. It is the deadliest attack since May 24th, when 21 people were killed in an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. And a motive has not yet been determined when police briefed the public on Sunday night. So let's take a look at that.
Based on the previous information relayed by homicide investigators regarding the white van involved and seen leaving the scene of the incident in the city of Alhambra, the Torrance Police Department was notified, and at 10:20 a.m., the Torrance police officers located the white van, matching the description near the area of Sepulveda Boulevard and Hawthorne Boulevard. As Torrance officers pulled behind the vehicle, the white van entered a shopping center parking lot. When officers exited their patrol vehicle to contact the occupant, they heard one gunshot. And although that closes a portion of a very long day for all of us, the investigation is still ongoing. Sheriff's homicide detectives are working around the clock, gathering additional information and working on determining the motive behind this extremely tragic event.
So you got some information from that police briefing about this tragic shooting in California, but I've got a little more information for you here from Associated Press. The gunman, whom the authorities identified as 72-year-old Hu Can Tran, is believed to have then gone to a dance hall in the neighboring city of Alhambra, but he fled, according to the authorities. Officers later found him in a parked van after he reportedly shot himself to death. None of the victims had been officially identified as of Sunday night. Speaking at a Sunday evening news conference, the sheriff said he didn't have the exact ages of the people killed, but that all appeared to be over 50. The massacre in Monterey Park was the nation's 5th mass killing this month. And I'm gonna say that just one more time for you. 5th mass killing this month. And it struck one of California's largest celebrations of a holiday observed in many Asian cultures, dealing another blow to a community that has been the target of high-profile violence in recent years. This is a horrible tragedy and one that we see all too often in America. I mean, we're only in the 3rd week of January, and this is the 5th mass killing of this month. Dan, you're in California. What are your thoughts about this?
No, yeah, while I'm not directly affected, like these are a lot of areas as someone who grew up in Los Angeles County that I know very well. I give a lot of crap to my transplant friends who say that East Los Angeles is like Echo Park and Silver Lake, but that's not true. That's places like Alhambra, that's places like Monterey Park that have these rich ethnic histories. Like especially people talk about how Monterey Park especially was one of the suburban areas of Los Angeles, which kind of like Boyle Heights was for Mexican immigrants, was a real home for Asian immigrants to kind of come and actually have their shot, the American dream. You even go down to like Alhambra's a similar way. Torrance, California, where the gunman was actually found, is also a heavily Asian American community. So thankfully there's no more carnage there. But I think one of the most annoying things that I see in the coverage of this, I mean, let alone the fact that, like you're emphasizing, this is not even the fully complete month of the year, and we've probably already had more mass shootings than like any civilized country in the world in 2023 so far. And we're gonna continue to beat that number. But the fact that you have people feeling like they're scoring a point rhetorically because we live in this team perspective of politics, where they're like, it can't be a hate crime because the shooter was apparently Asian. And it's like, first of all, we have to talk about the misogyny that always happens, and a lot of these shooters end up being men. There's rumors about the motives of the shooting that are still very early, so it's hard to get into. But there are so many layers in the fact that there are many other countries who celebrate Lunar New Year, and America only happens to be the one where we have violence and when this is involved. So it's really shocking and terrifying. My heart like pours out for these communities, but like, yeah, regardless of who the shooter is, this is yet another situation where another community, especially the Asian American Pacific Islander communities, can't feel safe celebrating in their own spaces, and it's just really terrible.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point about the argument that's usually made by right wingers, which is, they're a member of this community, they can't possibly be committing a hate crime, which I'll just say as someone who's in law school, that's not true at all. Conservatives, you can absolutely commit a hate crime against a member of a group that you are also a part of. So if they're watching this, please stop using that argument. But I do have a little more information about the shooting. So Brandon Say fought off the gunman when he arrived at the second location. Let's take a look at this.
Something came over me. I realized I needed to get the weapon away from him. I needed to take this weapon, disarm him, or else everybody would have died. When I got the courage, I lunged at him with both my hands, grabbed the weapon, and we had a struggle. We struggled into the lobby, trying to get this gun away from each other. He was hitting me across the face, bashing the back of my head. Finally, at one point, I was able to pull the gun away from him, shove him aside, create some distance, point the gun at him, intimidate him, shout at him and say, "Get the hell out of here. I'll shoot. Get away. Go." I really thought I would have to shoot him if he came at me. This is when he turned around and walked out the door, jogged back to his van.
Just incredibly, incredibly brave from him. But I'll say, I'm tired of people having to be brave. I'm tired of average American citizens, average people having to, stand up to people with guns and confront them and be put in these situations where they have to be brave and they have to put their lives on the line, because we are the only country where this happens. This shouldn't be happening on a regular basis. A couple politicians also made some statements about the shooting. California Governor Gavin Newsom took to Twitter, tweeted this out: "Spent time in Monterey Park today, meeting with leaders and those impacted by this terrible tragedy. No other country in the world is terrorized by this constant stream of gun violence. We need real gun reform at a national level." And I think that he did a good job in that statement by pointing out that the gun reform needs to come at the national level, because a lot of people respond to this and say, well, California has some of the most strict gun laws in the country, but you had a mass shooting in California. Clearly gun laws don't work, but they're right to an extent. They don't work when it's a state by state basis for gun laws, because you're always gonna be able to travel to a neighboring state and buy a gun with significant ease, especially considering the states that border California, which have exceptionally lax gun laws, and then come back. And I'm not saying that's what the shooter did in this instance, but that is the reason why it has to be national reform. Speaking of national reform, President Biden also weighed in on Twitter. He tweeted out, "Jill and I are praying for those killed and injured in last night's deadly mass shooting in Monterey Park. I'm monitoring the situation closely as it develops and urge the community to follow guidance from local officials and law enforcement in the hours ahead." So I have some more data about mass shootings just this year 3 weeks into the year and 36 mass shootings. This is America in 2023. So this chart says 35, 36 with this latest mass shooting. And it's just horrifying. But of course, Republicans are offering the most sensible and the simplest solutions to gun violence in the country. Here is Texas Representative Michael McCall sharing his plan on how to address gun violence.
The way I look at it is we need the intelligence, we need information sharing, we need to connect the dots. Every one of these cases, and I guarantee you're gonna see it in this one as well, the shooter had warning signs along the way. We just didn't respond or pick it up. So in my judgment, we could create a system. I introduced a bill that we could take public information on the internet, have an algorithm to stop the threat before it happens. That is a smart approach rather than violating Second Amendment rights.
Mass surveillance is the solution to gun violence, not say less guns. Dan, do you think that that's a solid plan?
It's maddening because it's not just mass surveillance, it's surveillance capitalism. Like, we have to put this in the context of this is putting money in the pockets of people who support politicians like Representative McCall, right? Like, this reminds me of how, ICE is starting to leverage not just the license plate data of people who are crossing through the border, but they're just, privately buying license plate data from different companies who happen to run ticketing or like parking places around the country. So they're taking just like American citizens' data and harvesting and logging where they're going in and where they're driving. So you can make money around that. It just continues and builds on top of itself. And at the end of the day, it makes me angry because these people who love and protect the Second Amendment, like, listen, I love shooting guns as much as the next person, like in ranges, like in pure sport, like not in that whole like sort of like broader fetishization of guns context that a lot of Americans have. But they always love to protect the Second Amendment so strongly and so purely. They're willing to throw all the other amendments away. Like, we'll watch the First Amendment and see what people are saying online, and then we'll break into people's like rights to privacy and property till like now we know what they're saying and we can predict crimes before they're actually happening. Like, there's certain things about, my last point here is like, there's a certain thing to be said about we need to be more careful about tracking when people have mental illness checks or things where they might be buying a lot of guns and also reporting a lot of mental health episodes. Like, those are things we should be tracking, but not this kind of stuff he's talking about. It's just another cop out to give the gun lobby and surveillance capitalists more money.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. They don't have any problems like stomping all over people's 14th Amendment rights as long as they can protect people's Second Amendment rights. And honestly, if you ask most of these Republican politicians to name, I don't know, the 11th Amendment, these constitutional Republicans, I promise you, almost all of them have no idea what the 11th Amendment is, which is fine if you're just a normal person who doesn't call yourself a Constitution defender. But for these Republicans, it's a little bit hypocritical. From one piece of Republican nonsense to another, let's get into this next story. Iowa Republicans are trying to drastically limit what types of food that people in the state can buy using SNAP benefits. Iowa Republicans introduced a bill on January 11th, which requested a waiver from the USDA to let the state limit the foods that can be purchased with SNAP benefits inside the state. So for anyone who doesn't know, SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's also known as food stamps. Now, this is a federal assistance program for people with low to no income. And although the program is run by the USDA and they pay for 100% of the cost for the food assistance, the federal and state governments split the administrative cost 50-50. Okay, that's out of the way. So what exactly do these Iowa Republicans want to limit with their new bill? Time reported that the bill, which 39 Republicans co-sponsored, would require SNAP recipients to have a more restrictive list of food items they can buy that would mirror the food approved for the state's current Women, Infants, and Children program, otherwise known as WIC. It would also require an asset limit on SNAP participants, and Medicare recipients would need to work at least 20 hours a week to receive benefits. HuffPost also reported on the story. In lieu of fresh meat, canned salmon and tuna would be allowed, according to a list of Iowa's approved WIC foods. In addition to pantry staples like flour and oil, other prohibited items would include canned soup and sliced cheese. Only brown and not white rice would be permitted, and shoppers would have to swap white bread and pasta for 100% whole grain versions. Even if you live in an area where you can't access whole grain options, you still won't be able to purchase the white bread or non-whole grain pasta, because that makes sense. So a lot of nonprofit groups and activist organizations have been raising the alarm on the detrimental impact this bill would have if it goes into law. And one group that has been very vocal about this is the Iowa Hunger Coalition, which according to its website is an association of organizations and individuals committed to ending hunger in Iowa. So Luke Elzinga, the chair of the nonprofit, told Iowa's News Now that Iowans on SNAP would not be able to buy meat, flour, butter, cooking oil, frozen prepared foods. It's a huge list. If you're living in poverty and using a program, and there's already so much stigma around SNAP, to then be told we're going to police the food that you can get is incredibly damaging to people's mental health. So how exactly are Iowa Republicans justifying introducing this bill and limiting the foods that people on SNAP are able to buy? Time reported that according to House Republicans, the proposal currently being discussed in subcommittees would help cut costs. It's these entitlement programs. They're the ones that are growing within the budget and are putting pressure on us being able to fund other priorities. House Speaker Pat Grassley told KCCI, a Des Moines news outlet. And if you are wondering, yes, Pat Grassley is related to Senator Chuck Grassley. He is his grandson. Little dynasty of politics out there in Iowa. But right now I want you to think back to what I told you at the beginning of this about how the program is funded. The money for the food comes directly from the federal government, and the state and federal government split administrative costs 50-50. Changing the program and the way this bill wants to do would drastically increase the administrative costs of operating the program. So if this bill becomes law, Iowa would be spending more money, not less. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great analysis that you have there, where you're talking about the administrative costs and having to pick and choose and now have to flag what people who are on SNAP and receiving these SNAP or WIC benefits, what they're buying. But the hypocrisy, which let's take for a given that doesn't matter in politics, especially not for the Republican Party, but take the layers of hypocrisy down by down. Like I remember back in the day, the Obama administration, where they were where Michelle Obama was getting a bunch of flack because they didn't have much to talk about, because she was saying, okay, let's try to have healthier foods in schools and try to promote those kinds of things. And Sarah Palin was turning around saying, let's have pizza and whatever we want to at our schools and not let Michelle Obama and these food czars, because that was the world that we lived in about 10 years ago, control what people are eating. Now Republicans are doing that and they don't bat an eye. Layer number one. Layer number two, like this, it almost looks like they're doing a similar thing of promoting, okay, these are healthier foods, but then it just gets unnecessarily, oh, you can't have frozen foods like frozen vegetables. You can't have like cooking oil. It's needlessly insane, and all it's meant to do is not just stigmatize the mental health, the physical health, like all kinds of things to make it harder on people who are already struggling. And there is, last point, grocery stores everywhere, like food banks, they talk about how much food gets thrown out and how much food waste we have in America, in the entire world, day after day, week after week, year after year. There is no reason why we as a developed country cannot feed everyone. So the idea that it would cost more, or we would save any money rather, to run this kind of program, not just for the extra administrative costs you mentioned, but just for the fact that we have the effing food, is ridiculous. And everyone should detest that kind of like explanation.
Yeah, and I also want to point out that, of course, their justification was that they need to save money or whatever. The Iowa government has a budget surplus, so they're not, they're not penny pinching over in Iowa. They have money. And to the point of they're saving money on the cost of food, despite the fact that the federal government provides that money. They're not providing that money. I mean, it's just really gross. But I think overall, what's really bothering me is this idea that they have this right to police what poor people eat. This idea that if you just ate healthier, somehow you wouldn't be poor. That if you stopped buying the food that's probably available at the limited grocery stores in your area, and started buying from Whole Foods or something, or started buying all fresh food, which doesn't last as long, which is not necessarily feasible for a lot of families who don't have the ability to go to the grocery store every single day to buy new fresh food, or every couple of days or every week or whatever. Sometimes they need to buy in larger quantities of frozen food so that they have their meals ready to go, for their children, for themselves. And it's really gross. And I'm sick and tired of Republicans trying to limit what poor people can do just on the basis of them being poor. It really is. It all boils down to capitalism.
And they've been doing it for decades. So what's old is new again, really, with them.
Absolutely. I will say one last point before we go to break. Michelle Obama was doing her food initiative when I was in high school, and I'll never forgive her for making the donut man stop coming to school selling donuts.
Oh no, I didn't experience that. We still had our popsicles, our Otter Pops that we could buy for 50 cents when I was a kid. So that was all fine.
Okay, well, we gotta go to break, but stick around because we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Damage Report. I'm here with Dan Evans to break down the news. And next story, it is this weekend was the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. So let's get into this.
Church, not the state. Women must decide their fate. Not the church, not the state. Women must decide their fate. Not the church, not the state. Women must decide their fate.
Over the weekend, thousands fled to the streets to demand protections on reproductive rights to mark the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, which we all remember was overturned by the Supreme Court last summer. So, New York Times reported that the events, which were expected to draw thousands of people from Honolulu to Hartford, make up the latest iteration of the Women's March, the protest series that began in 2017 in the wake of the election of President Donald J. Trump. So the Women's March also tweeted out some pictures of the protests. They tweeted, "We're fired up and ready to march for our rights because this fight is bigger than Roe. They thought that we would stay home and that this would end with Roe. They were wrong. We're putting every politician on blast. If you come for our rights, we'll come for you, period." So in the wake of the Dobbs decision and overturning Roe v. Wade, I want to show you all a couple of maps of what abortion looks like in the United States now. So here's one that shows states that have expanded access in blue, protected yellow, not protected orange, hostile is red, and then illegal is the darker red color. But if we break it down even more, we can show you the states where abortion access is either not protected, has hostile laws, or is straight up illegal. So here is that map. And honestly, it's so much bigger than I would like it to be, which is very concerning. And of course, there are still states which are trying to prosecute women very harshly for accessing abortion care. I have a headline here from Arkansas: abortion equals murder under a proposed Arkansas law. So people who receive abortions would be treated the same as people who kill a human being who's already been born. I mean, this is so, as a woman, of course, I feel very strongly about this, as a person who has had an abortion, but also as a person who lives in a state where my access to abortion is protected. It's part of our state constitution. I'm in a position where I don't necessarily have to fear for myself, but knowing what I've been through, I mean, it's just so concerning to me what these women who live in these states, or these people who live in these states where it is illegal or restricted, are gonna have to go through, the hoops they'll have to jump through to just get something that was available to them like half a year ago. Dan, I got some more, but first I wanna get you in on this.
Yeah, it's really just echoing a lot of what you said here. It's so unfortunate that, the way our system works, we have this piecemeal process where state by state, you get the implementation of certain laws, or what I find is even more ridiculous, the restriction of freedoms and rights. Like there's the cannabis space, for example, where like because of the state by state overall legalization, you're getting something that's positive, and you're even starting to see things with other forms of like medicine, like medicinal therapies rather, right? But then when you get this restriction of rights when it comes to abortion access, it is really sickening because like when you look at the map that you were just showing over there, a lot of it, that's a lot of the country. And what I see there are places where, it's increasingly more difficult to get to those states and afford to live in those states where the laws are more equitable. And so that's what I worry about, is that ultimately these laws are going to hurt most, as many things often do in this country, people who are poorest, the people who have the least access to try to circumvent them or try to go to other places where abortion access is legal. And this is something that we have to continue to, especially on what should have been the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. We need to keep this on the forefront, keep fighting for.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on that for a second, because even in the cases where the women or the people are able to travel to another state to get abortions, to have abortions, there are still states that are limiting their ability to do that. There's states that are trying to make it illegal to assist these people in traveling to those states and getting abortions. They're trying to make laws so that the doctors who provide the abortions in states where it's completely legal could be held criminally responsible in the state where it's outlawed. I mean, it's really grotesque. They're going so far to restrict people's freedoms. But I do want to talk about Kamala Harris because she spoke on abortion, and this is what she had to say.
Even then, people live in fear of what might be next, because Republicans in Congress are now calling for a nationwide abortion ban. Some even from the moment of conception. The right of every woman in every state in this country to make decisions about her own body is on the line. And I've said it before and I will say it again. How dare they? How dare they?
So it's Vice President Kamala Harris railing against efforts in Washington and in Republican-led states to restrict abortion. So AP reported that ahead of her speech, Harris told abortion rights advocates on a conference call Sunday that they should keep up their energy as they push back against restrictions in Republican-led states and work on behalf of candidates in local races who support abortion access. So Celinda Lake, who is a Democratic pollster that worked with Biden, said that the White House strategy has 3 goals. So you can create an atmosphere and put pressure on these states to make it more difficult to pass draconian restrictions. You can set up the contrast for 2024, and you can use this as a major motivator for people to turn out to vote. So while Biden released a statement on the 50th anniversary of the decision, there are concerns that Biden and his administration have exhausted their options for executive action. And I'll just say this, that I am frustrated with the Biden administration's reticence to use the word abortion. We've seen this for decades now within the Democratic Party. Obama said that it should be safe, legal, and rare. That type of language surrounding abortion only further stands to stigmatize it. So I'll be honest, I'm tired of women's health or women's reproductive health. Call it what it is. It's abortion, and it's not a dirty word. Dan?
I absolutely agree with you. And I'll even take it a step further to say that the Obama administration dangled the idea of abortion access and like giving that thing to people who would support him in this presidential campaign, and then immediately deprioritized it. His biggest proponents will say, oh, well, he had the Obamacare to deal with and he had the 2008 financial crisis to deal with. But you have to walk and chew gum at the same time. These are lives and laws that are at stake that, again, it's ridiculous. We've covered earlier on the show where Republicans love to pick and choose which laws, which times they want to put on their constitutional originalist hat and what time they want to put on their, well, yeah, let's just do what we want to kind of hat, which is more times it definitely should be. But this is one of those moments where they're perfectly fine taking rights away. They're perfectly fine with the government stepping in to people's lives as long as it fits their like theocratic agenda, which is, Yeah, it's scary. We need to continue fighting against it, because that overall like possibility of getting that nationwide abortion ban, it's much closer to reality than definitely should be possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And when a Democrat says it's my top priority, I'm just going to assume that thing's never going to happen, because too many times something has been their top priority and then they get into office and do nothing with it. But when it comes to Joe Biden specifically, I do have some anxiety around his willingness to do anything to protect abortion in this country, because he's seen that it didn't hurt him in the midterms as much as he thought it would. He didn't take in language, sure, he took a hard stance against Republicans outlawing abortion in these states. But like I said earlier, the actions that he actually took were limited. The very few that he took were limited. So now that he's seen that it didn't necessarily hurt the Democrats, I don't have a lot of hope that he's going to be doing a lot leading up to the 2024 election. I'm sure he'll be talking a lot about it, but I don't know if he'll be taking a lot of action. Okay, 3 heavy stories off the top. Now we get to have some fun with this next one.
Melania was really something a number of years, a long time ago. She said, there are 2 women on television that are absolutely incredible. They love you so much. And that's the first time I ever heard of Diamond and Silk. I said, well, let me see it. And they were just great. And they were loyal, and good times, bad times, it didn't matter. They were totally loyal. And we're going to do a little service, I think, for Diamond. And we're going to do it up in North Carolina. And I don't think the date has been set yet, but it's going to be set pretty soon. We'll give her a service that she really deserves.
Well, the funeral of Lynette Hardaway, also known as Diamond, of conservative duo Diamond and Silk, happened this weekend. And it was so very bad.
And, the world has lost one of its brightest stars, real star, but I see that we have another star who is equal to, but she stepped up and she is different. I'm serious. I thought I knew them both. I didn't. I knew Diamond, but I didn't know Silk at all. I just learned about Silk. You're fantastic. You're going to carry on beyond anybody's wildest imagination.
I need you all to remember that he said that at a funeral. Okay, so after he belittled Hardaway's partner in crime, Trump went on to once again claim without evidence at a funeral that the 2020 election was stolen from him. He also, I'm sorry, it's just so messed up. He also complained that the funeral was too long. Let's watch.
And I don't believe, they told me, I said, give me a little time, because I have a lot of people waiting for me back in a place called Palm Beach, Florida. They said, give me a little time. What do you think it'll take? Oh, about 15, 20 minutes, in and out. I said, well, it could take longer. This is a little longer than 15 minutes, right?
Okay, that is not the end of the craziness of the funeral. But first, Dan, I want to get your thoughts. Do you think this is a worthy celebration of Diamond's life?
That's great framing. Thank you there, Rayyvana, for putting that on my plate. Sure, yeah, it's a fairly worthy celebration for someone like Diamond, who, I don't necessarily love to speak ill of the dead, but and not to even follow that with a but it's worth to mention that Diamond and Silk kind of created a lot of their political careers. How can I say this in a least crazy way for a majority white audience? Performing for, Donald Trump and his fans and his audience. And so I think that the idea that Donald Trump makes a funeral about someone else about him is nothing new under the sun. The idea that he turns something that's oh, I really know Silk now, and this is something that's going to be, she's gonna really find resilience through this, and she's gonna get through this. He somehow turns that into a backhanded compliment about, oh, I didn't really know her before this, so cool. And then maybe I caught on this, but Diamond and Silk, they're black figureheads. I want to say Donald Trump was making a colored people time joke at the end, oh wow, this funeral's taken a little bit longer than I expected here. That's real interesting. And so I was Donald Trump is playing the hits. I'm still in the mode where I'm assuming he's not going to be the Republican nominee again because he's a loser. He failed. He's bad. He sucks and he's terrible. He's not a winner. He's not a winner. But he's doing the same routine he usually does, where he talks about how the election's stolen. He talks about how great he is. Talks about how he influences other people. He's going to be doing the same routine. He's done this before at random people's weddings at Mar-a-Lago. So This is just the tape track that he does in his brain. Hopefully he doesn't end up being president or anyone who has sucked up to him for the past several years.
I was literally just about to bring up the Mar-a-Lago weddings because it's kind of what you're hoping for, right? It's got to be what you're hoping for when you invite.
Play the hits, dude.
Yeah, you're inviting Donald Trump to your wedding. You're hoping he's going to do election stuff. You do your wedding at Mar-a-Lago. You're hoping he's going to go up to the mic and start riffing about Khomeini or whatever, whatever he can at the wedding. Yeah, so I think maybe that it's what Diamond would have wanted. But when it came time for her to speak, she was pretty much just as bad. Daily Beast reported that she said, instead of asking if Americans are vaxxed or unvaxxed, the real question to ask here is, are Americans being poisoned? Which I had to pause there for a second. And I know it's because a lot of people are saying that Diamond died of COVID and she's tired of people asking if she was vaccinated. And she wants to sort of insinuate that she died of the vaccine and not from COVID. But she won't answer the question. She won't tell you whether she was vaccinated or not. But okay, it continued on. In the wild, when they want to depopulate and sterilize a large group of animals, they usually inject one animal, and that one animal infect the rest of the animals. People are dropping dead around here, and nobody is talking about it. They are dropping dead suddenly and unexpectedly. And remember, there is, of course, she's insinuating that the COVID vaccine is causing sudden deaths, but there's no proof that it actually creates any harm and would cause people to die. Okay, let's get back into this funeral madness. What I want to say to everyone is, don't you dare call me a conspiracy theorist, because I saw it happen. I saw how it happened. I was there when it happened, and it happened suddenly, she said, urging the crowd to get some answers as to why people are falling dead suddenly. Silk has repeatedly denied on Twitter that Diamond passed away due to COVID-19. Instead, MyPillow's CEO Mike Lindell has stated publicly that the pro-Trump pundit suddenly collapsed in her kitchen. So I said before, her cause of death still unclear, and they have not released an autopsy. But if you thought that was the end of the funeral, oh no, there's more. So each speaker paid tribute to her unwavering support of the former president, because that's what you want to be remembered for at your funeral, apparently. And another secret about Diamond, she had a boyfriend. Yes, that's right. And she had a boyfriend, and oh my God, we would talk about him all the time. His name, President Donald J. Trump. Yes, President Donald J. Trump. That was her boyfriend. Added Diamond's side piece was Mike Lindell. So, Jesus Christ. Okay, comments from the funeral have sparked a mass wave of vaccine hatred once again from the GOP. A lot of you probably saw this yesterday. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene posted this video from the funeral where Silk is talking about people suddenly dropping dead. And she tweeted, I demand an immediate investigation into COVID vaccines and the dramatic increase of people dying suddenly. This can no longer be ignored, and this is not political. I will say I watched the whole funeral because I hate myself. And for a good portion of it, Silk is describing how Diamond died. And I gotta say, it really just sounds like this person had a heart attack, which happens to be the #1 cause of death in people in America. So it wouldn't be sudden or a drastic increase in cases of that happening. But Dan, I'll let you get your final thoughts on this funeral.
Yeah, I come from a family of strong Southern Black women, and I think they would probably dodge the opportunity to use a comparison about animals at one of their sisters' funerals just for reasons, many historical reasons, many otherwise. But I just, for the sake of keeping down my breakfast I'm just gonna like not touch the whole like whether or not the boyfriend thing with Donald Trump or Mike Lindell is an analogy or a metaphor or like some bit of like Freudian truth. I think we can all say we're happy to put Diamond to bed in this case. Now, the annoying thing is here with Silk is that, yeah, she even uses this opportunity to, okay, what clip can I get out to the right-wing universe to continue this, oh, it was the vaccine kind of grift that is just, again, sickening, especially because a lot of Diamond, RIPs, and Silk's existence is to try to bring conservatism that would sound kind of sketchy coming from a white kind of tone, but may have black people say it, so maybe that you could get some black supporters on the fringes. And that's a really terrible message to be spreading to the black community, which is at just as high a risk for any of these things as any other American. So I would be way more careful if I were her, just from like a moral level, but this is Diamond and rip. Silk we're talking about. So like, I don't know if morals are like, I mean, I do know morals are way out the door with them.
All right, and at this time, I just want to say, if I suddenly pass away for any reason, please don't let Donald Trump come up on my funeral stage and start riffing about the election.
He might have some bangers, I don't know. I mean, maybe not about the election, but it might be like, Rayyvana, I didn't know that much about it, but I saw some streams while, sometimes I'd be watching Fox News on one thing, and then I'll have the iPad with the streams. I even used a little Prime subscription there. It was really nice. She had a lot of good things to say, not great things to say about me, but great things to say. And you know what? That was fine. Everyone else though, Dan though, he was really great. That was really no. I'll make sure he throws down some bangers at your funeral.
I appreciate that. That was a great Trump impression. Okay, we have to go to a break, but stick around because we'll be right back with more stories for you all. Okay, welcome back to the Damage Report. I'm Rayyvana filling in for John Iadarola, but don't forget that you can see him tonight on Old School, celebrate his 11th anniversary with TYT. So that starts at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. And joining me today to break down the news is Dan Evans. Thank you for being with me. Are you ready to get into this next story?
Let's do it.
All right, everybody, watch this.
You're the first group of people that are hearing this, besides my family. I will be challenging Kyrsten Sinema for the United States Senate, and I need all of your support.
That was Arizona Democratic Representative Ruben Gallego, who announced that he will be running for Kyrsten Sinema's Senate seat in 2024. So we got a little more from that announcement, so let's watch.
Most families feel that they are one or two paychecks away from going under. That is not the way that we should be living in this country. The rich and the powerful, they don't need more advocates. It's the people that are still trying to decide between groceries and utilities that needs a fighter for them. There is no lobbyist for working families. We could argue different ways about how to do it, but at the core, if you're more likely to be meeting with the powerful than the powerless, you're doing this job incorrectly. I'm sorry that politicians have let you down, but I'm gonna change that. I'm Ruben Gallego. I'm running to be the senator of Arizona. Because you deserve somebody fighting for you and fighting with you every day to make sure you have the same chance al sueño americano.
So that's his official announcement that he will be running, but we don't know if he'll be running against Kyrsten Sinema because she has not officially announced whether or not she's going to run for re-election in 2024. I seem to remember a couple years ago, she did an internship at a winery. Maybe she'll go back and do that full time. But so from Politico, Gallego's announcement comes after months of his teasing the idea of a Senate run and amid Democratic frustration with Sinema's opposition to key aspects of their agenda. The Arizona senator switched her party affiliation last month from Democrat to Independent, though she is counted as part of the Democratic Party's 51-seat Senate majority. So Gallego is potentially going to be the best candidate to go up against Sinema. And back in December of 2022, Public Policy Polling released a survey of Arizonians showing that headed into the 2024 election, Senator Sinema is broadly unpopular, surprise, surprise there. And she actually trails Representative Gallego significantly in a three-way race. So more on that from public polling. A US Senate race with Kari Lake as the Republican candidate would be a toss-up whether Sinema ran as an independent candidate or not. In a three-way contest, Lake would get 41% to 40% for Gallego, with Sinema at just 13%. In a head-to-head race, Gallego edges Lake 48 to 47, which is pretty close. Although Sinema would not have a serious path to victory as an independent candidate, she could have a spoiler effect since she gets 14% from Biden voters, but only 9% from Trump voters. So she'd be pulling more votes away from Gallegos than she would be from Kari Lake. But meanwhile, Sinema is still struggling with voters across all party lines. So let's take a look at this. Sinema standing among independents, Republicans improves post-party switch, but it's not great. If you look at that, most high disapproval ratings, low approval ratings. Independents, it's a little bit different. With Republicans, she's improved, but still broadly unpopular. So I also have this that shows the America's most unpopular and popular senators. Mitch McConnell's sitting up there at number 1. Right behind him, Joe Manchin. Kyrsten Sinema's in a 5th place on this, so pretty deeply unpopular. And political polls posted this to Twitter, which says 2024 Arizona Senate general election. Lake at 36%, Gallego 32%, Sinema at 14%. So I've got one more thing I'm gonna show you, which is the approval ratings outshines 2024's other vulnerable senators. As you can see, Kyrsten Sinema's line goes very down, just straight down, and you love to see it, folks. So Kyrsten Sinema is a bane on the Democrats in the Senate. She needs to go, like I said, why doesn't she just go full time at the winery she interned in? I don't know. I don't know if she'll run or not. Dan, what do you think?
I mean, that's a good take. She can make more money and get the camera time that she apparently so desperately wants, whether it's at Davos or whether it's, making gestures at votes or whatever she's doing by just being a CNN pundit. Like she's just really just running out the clock on her political career. She just wants to stand up as this, I don't know, like I remember her speech at Davos the other week where she's like, I stood up against the filibuster to make sure that we didn't have these, election deniers and these people who would overcorrect on the Democratic Party try to fight and destroy democracy. So I see myself as one of the few people standing in the way of this chaos. When in reality, and you can look at this with Joe Manchin too, so it's not just an attack on Kyrsten Sinema. The act of making it harder for people to get a minimum wage increase, for people to get extensions on other different programs that would help them during this weird middle post-pandemic recovery that we're currently experiencing right now. The fact that the Democrats didn't fight enough for that, and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, willingly or not, were the people standing in front of that, is something that is definitely going to ignite, people broadly. I think it's going to be regardless of Democrats or Republicans, because regular people want to see things get done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have low expectations that she would run again, just because there's money to be made in politics, but there's a lot more money to be made sitting on a board of trustees for some corporation that you helped block, legislation in favor of, to prevent, I don't know, more environmental regulations to stop that, so that an oil company, because an oil company told you to do so, or whatever, some business organization that told you to vote no on $15 an hour minimum wage because they would hate to have people, making enough to barely make it by in this society. Other options for her that I like more. So I recently found out that Kyrsten Sinema is pretty prolific at reselling her old garbage on Facebook Marketplace. So maybe she could just go full time selling her old workout clothes and equipment on there.
There are some very weird places on the internet that could particularly go. So maybe she can make a lot of money with that. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. So that was an interesting story. I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, I think Kyrsten Sinema is someone who enjoys having power. I think she stands for nothing, and she'll do whatever it takes to maintain power. But I think at this point she needs to be taking a serious look at her chances, or lack thereof, with this next election, and make a decision sooner rather than later. Or because she loves to be the spotlight and she loves to be the center of attention, she might hold out to, stress out Ruben Gallegos, who has now announced that he's running, and to, play around that she might run spoiler, to make it harder on the Democrats. But that is all the time we have today, unless you are a member, in which case you will be watching the aftermath right after this. So join us there. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.